Welcome to Back from the Abyss. I'm Dr. Craig Peacock. Before we get to today's story, I wanted to read an email that I just got a few days ago, which I think brought up a lot of interesting points about the Secret Sauce episode with Elizabeth and her MDMA work. Here we go. Hi, Craig. I recently heard your podcast about the MDMA session with Elizabeth and the surprise, almost disbelief that she had received the placebo, especially with all the progress she clearly made after the 3 medicine sessions and subsequent integration sessions. My placebo experience has been just the opposite. I finished my phase 3 study in May 2021, and I'm 99.9% sure that I received the placebo. It was and continues to be one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. The grief, disappointment, sadness, and frustration at not receiving the medicine after the rigorous screening process was incredibly overwhelming. And then to do the extremely hard work of trying to work through the traumas without the benefit of MDMA, it was like surgery without anesthesia. It was excruciating. Suicidal ideation was super activated, and now I hear that even after the unblinding, which won't happen till at least October, it could be another year after that before I can do the crossover with actual MDMA because of therapist trainings. I want to share with you a quote that I heard Rick Doblin say on a podcast. Quote, "So the big risks for us are in the placebo group, where people realize they're getting the placebo. We had one person try to kill herself when she realized she had the placebo and she'd given up. She was like, I have terrible PTSD. I gave up my meds in order to be in the study. And now it will take me 2 years so I can do the crossover and get actual MDMA, and I just can't live that way." She tried to kill herself twice. We had another woman who had such terrible suicidal ideation that she checked herself into the hospital to avoid killing herself. And she was also in the placebo group. End of quote. I know that in phase 2, unblinding happened right after someone finished their study, and then the crossover to actual MDMA happened shortly thereafter. That is the way it should be done. I understand that there are FDA protocols that MAPS is following, but it's a dangerous, slippery path for us who got totally opened up in the study with just the placebo. Like so many others, I've been working on complex PTSD for decades. For me, 35 years. I had so much optimism that maybe, just maybe, the elixir of healing was in reach. I understand that the placebo part of the trial is essential. I'm happy to have been able to do my part to help get MDMA out to all the people, like me, looking to find help. I just feel like not enough emphasis or understanding is out there for folks in the placebo group who, unlike Elizabeth, did not move forward, but in fact moved into a darker, more helpless and hopeless place. My journey has moved to ketamine work, and I'm exploring some underground options so I can be proactive instead of waiting for the crossover, which I have no idea if and when that will be available. I guess the bottom line with this email is that we have to be careful with overselling, overpromising, overhyping, and overpublicizing a study where half of the participants might have had or are still having difficult, if at times excruciatingly bumpy and jagged journeys. We're dealing with people, not just data. Thanks for listening. Keep up the great work you're doing. This email brings up so many important issues. A side note, the participant that Rick Doblin mentions that had the suicide attempts, that's actually my long-term patient, and I was her co-therapist in the study, and it was one of the most painful things I've ever dealt with in my career. It just ripped my heart open. So I get this. I've seen this, not only worked with Elizabeth with her amazing, really kind of miraculous recovery with placebo, but I've also seen someone almost die twice. This is such a complicated issue with phase 2 and phase 3 studies because, as the letter writer mentioned, to get good statistical data, we need to have placebo-controlled trials. But for someone who's suffering with such terrible illness, whether it's multiple sclerosis or cancer or PTSD, and you finally get in one of these studies and you could be getting a treatment which could change your life forever, you also know there's a 50% chance that you're going to get placebo. That's just excruciating. And I have to say from my end, as a co-therapist in the trial, it was very painful because, we have to walk this line of being a therapist, but also a researcher. In my heart and soul, I'm a clinician. And when I was in the MAP study, I had to act as an investigator. And, there's a reason that we call people in the study participants, not patients. We're really thinking about research and trying to do research, obviously trying to maintain safety. But, as the letter writer mentioned, when you have PTSD, which is all about a break in trust, a break in hope, I think it's an almost more brutal placebo group, if you will, than being in a cancer study. And again, I don't have any easy answers to this. I think MAPS is doing what they have to do, what the FDA requires, but it is true that, some people in the placebo group are going to suffer horribly. And then some people, like Elizabeth, I think, her combination of not having complex PTSD, as I mentioned in that episode, she did not have attachment trauma. And she almost undoubtedly had genetic markers, genetic predisposition for responding to the placebo effect, which is a really fascinating area of research. If you Google that, the genetic features of the placebo effect, there's a whole bunch of genes now that are being linked to placebo responders and non-responders. So again, I really appreciate that letter. I'm so sorry that you're still suffering so much. I hope you find healing. I think you will. It just might take a little longer. Okay, let's move on to today's story. I am fascinated with the roles that expectation, setting, dosage, and route of administration play with psychoactive drugs. For example, an IV morphine drip can make unbearable pain completely manageable, while IV heroin, which is immediately converted to morphine once it crosses the blood-brain barrier, heroin destroys tens of thousands of lives a year. A benzodiazepine, such as lorazepam, when taken orally at sensible doses, can stop a panic attack in its tracks. Yet snorting or injecting benzos, or mixing them with alcohol, can lead to complete blackout and horrific consequences. Taking psilocybin mushrooms with friends out in nature versus at night alone in the darkened streets of an unfamiliar city versus with a trained trauma therapist in a healing setting. The resulting risks and benefits and experiences are completely and mind-blowingly different. In today's story, we hear Graham's long and winding road with various drugs and alcohol in the context of childhood trauma and bipolar disorder, with a particular emphasis on his very complicated relationship with ketamine. For years, he used and abused massive quantities of ketamine. Yet now, he's transitioned to using ketamine in a therapeutic context with me. And the experience of ketamine, the consequences, and the end results are just shockingly different. All because of expectation, setting, dosage, and manner of administration.
I was born, only child, healthy, good to go, happy. Only child for 2 years. And then my mother got pregnant with twins, and they were born 3 months premature. And one of the first memories of my life is in the intensive care unit, seeing them. And their hearts didn't work. They were just, holding on by a thread. And the doctors were telling them to pull the plug on them because they thought they'd be vegetables. And they persevered, and they were born 1 pound, 6 ounces. And it was just, that's my first memory of being in the clean suit and holding them. And even as a 2-year-old, I remember just seeing how small they were. And so they had multiple heart surgeries. Their valves didn't work. And in that process, their brains did not get enough oxygen. So hence a million problems later in life. But all in all, they survived. But for the first I would say about 3 years of their life, it was life or death struggle. And I just remember, they had heart machines, their hearts would stop in the middle of the night and they'd have to deal with that. And it was just too much for my parents to take care of me and them. So I was kind of removed from the situation and passed around family. I'm so glad I didn't have to go to like an orphanage or some sort of something like that. And then until about age 5, just because, just passed between extended family. It was my first time meeting them, obviously, and grandma, but
It's almost like you became a foster kid. I mean, with ostensibly loving other families,
no,
but you went out into kind of family foster care.
Exactly. So that was extremely confusing for me as a, only child before that. And then all of a sudden it's like, my mom remembers this one time I asked her, are you my mother? Or I asked her, are you still my mother? And she just broke down, but it's confusing. All the attention's on you. And then all of a sudden you're just kind of cast into the wind. And that's the time you're, setting up those connections in your brain with your parents about love and being part of a unit. And so that definitely, I don't know, we're still talking about it in therapy, but that definitely had some thing to do with where I'm at now.
Yeah. So for basically, 3 years, you were not with your parents?
Yes. Yeah. I'd see them every once in a while, but it was definitely just passed around, and luckily we did have, my grandparents were still alive at that point, and we had good people in our family, but I was just kind of passed around. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how was that to rejoin your family as a little boy?
I don't really remember that, if that makes sense. I kind of have a blackout memory from about age 3 to 5 or 6. And I remember some, very intense memories from 2 to 3, which is strange for humans, right? To remember that far back, correct? Mm-hmm. Possibly. But yeah, I don't know. I think my brain just kind of blocked that out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder too, one of the reasons that people don't remember their childhoods is because they aren't getting the mirroring. Because if you think about how memories develop, that you come home and you report to your parents, this happened at school, or I passed the spelling bee, you got an A, and your parents mirror back, oh, that's so great, or that's wonderful, or that's so terrible that bully, attacked you, or but there's this whole mirroring process that fixes memories. But sometimes when I hear people talk about not remembering periods of their childhood, I wonder if they were actually received enough kind of mirroring and empathic connection.
Yeah, and that would make complete sense. It was a little fractured and, passed between different people, and maybe that mirroring process was broken. And I don't know enough about the neuroscience of how memories happen, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah. So then, as you rejoin your family, are you starting to have, any behavioral or, emotional issues as a little guy, as an elementary school kid? And
Absolutely. Chronic ADHD, lifelong, but, they knew pretty early that something was a little bit off, but also like borderline genius IQ, all that testing, which I still don't believe, but yeah, so hyper intelligent with serious behavioral and attention stuff. I could never sit still. I was crazy as a kid, which led to very early stimulant medications for ADD, Ritalin, whatever, amphetamine salts. I think that started about 5th grade. And it was I just remember it being just like force fed to me and having to take, going to the nurse at like right after lunch and take more. And that's when the school of thought of that something is wrong with me. That was just ingrained from so young. It's like and that honestly, I was kind of trained to be a drug addict, because it's like, oh, something's wrong with you. You need this pill. You need this external substance to be normal, or, to be complete. So that was, drug addict training.
Yeah. I could see where,
if that makes sense.
Unconsciously, at least as a little boy, when you were sent to live with other family members, how could you not think that there was something, not lovable or not something broken in you, and then you're going to elementary school and they're saying, okay, the way you need to get through your day is you have to medicate, because otherwise you're not, your behavior's not acceptable, you're not a functioning little boy.
Could not focus. Yeah. I was like kind of on the cusp of the grades, right, with my birthday being in July. So they kind of started me early. So I was less mentally mature, less physically mature than all of my peers the way through. All the way through college pretty much. So it almost felt like I started at a disadvantage a little bit. And I was always, we'll progress to high school, but it was always, oh, you're this extremely intelligent person. You are ahead of other people mentally, which I was not. That was a lie. And my parent, when your parents they try and validate themselves by an intelligent, successful offspring. And really they're just trying to, validate themselves or live vicariously through. Yeah. So that was a big mistake.
And I wonder too, if they needed you, at least unconsciously, if not consciously, they needed you to be not just okay, but maybe more than okay, to kind of balance out just all the grief and pain with your sisters, and realizing what was not going to happen for them. But maybe little you, they thought, okay, he tests very high. He's gifted. He can be.
They wanted me to be exceptional, above and beyond. And I'm not that. They still think that. And I'm trying to just be a normal, they're not normal, but just functioning human being without expectations. So the expectations were set extremely high from day one. And didn't work out. Yeah. But as it played out, it's some weird social. I didn't really have the ability to make new friends. I kind of stayed in my comfort zone with one friend. His name was Tyler. Super weird dude. But so it was more social stuff, and also, I was like average grades. Because it's middle school. It's like it's a cakewalk. Yeah. But as I progressed, 6th, 7th, 8th grade, then the cracks really started to show in performance and everything. But looking back, I was always this kind of like emo sad boy. I just didn't know what it was. I thought that was just how everyone felt, and, just stuck in the cycle of going to school every day and just hating it, hating every minute of it, and being cranked out on amphetamines and Ritalin until like 2 a.m, and then having to wake up for school, at 6 a.m, and was just sleep deprived for probably my entire youth.
Where do you think the social friend struggles came from?
I'm not sure. I still struggle with it. I'm a chronic introvert. I always have been. It's more comfortable for me to be with my own brain than to deal with other people's. And, and that's part of, as I grew older, I started, drinking very heavily, and cocaine and ecstasy and all these social drugs to overcome my hyper introverted self. So that manifested seriously later on in life. But sober me is a very quiet, introverted being. I like my space. I like to be comfortable. I'm a Cancer. I'm like a crab.
It's interesting.
I like my shell.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I see the quietness and the introversion, but when I first met you, I remember being so struck by how just open and connected and just charming and engaging, and and I think you're a good example of, you can be a very engaging introvert.
Yes, exactly. It's like a switch that gets like flipped. Yeah, and that's why it's really hard for me to make plans or social plans. It's because that social side of me, I can't really plan when it comes out, So I have to make social plans very in the moment, even these days. Because maybe I'm on a manic bipolar upswing and I'm like, oh, let's hang out. Here's these trip plans. I'm going to California. I'm trying to, contacting everyone. And then, when that time comes, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to go anywhere, do anything. And canceling plans is like similar to heroin. It's like, oh my gosh, which is, Yeah.
What do you think came first? Your kind of plunge into alcohol or your plunge into really severe depression and hopelessness and eventually suicidality?
Oh, alcohol, 100%. It was, from age about 16 to 24, it was all fun and games. As far as the majority of the alcohol and drug use, it was just partying and partying. I would go to festivals and, sell jewelry, and life was just a big party. College years, it was just party, 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 have fun, fun, fun. Going to Burning Man, 6 festivals every summer, partying just like 4 or 5 days a week. But then it stopped becoming fun, and the addictions took over.
So in those years, there was still this maybe deep sadness or grief or even maybe early childhood trauma, but there wasn't really severe hopelessness or suicidality yet. That hadn't shown up.
And I think it was also because everything was so new and fresh, and it was just me as a young adult experiencing new things. It was all just this new experience, and like there was no burnout of anything yet because it was all just fun. I had a bunch of friends around me and we were just having fun, and every experience was new and special and amazing. And over time that wears out, and you realize some of these party friends that you travel around the country and go to festivals, like they're not your real friends. They don't have your back when things get rough. So yeah.
And it was around this time, in this period, when you had a really terrible loss.
Yes. My high school love sweetheart, this like the first woman that I completely intermeshed with and fell in love with. And we were together for about 3.5 years. And right before this happened, we took like a small break just because I was moving to Oakland, and she called me and she's like, "Oh, should I go on this trip to the Grand Canyon?" And it was like a 3-week rafting trip. And I was like, "Yes, you got to do it. You got to go. You have to do this." And then a week and a half into it, in the middle of the night, she was walking off, and we think she slipped and hit her head and just fell into the river. And that's when I was 21 years old. And her body was missing for 3 months. But the way I found out about it was really strange. I woke up in the morning and I got a Facebook message from her mother saying, "Caitlin fell into the Grand Canyon. My precious girl is gone." And, so I thought it was confirmed dead from that moment on. And I could tell it in just tone, motherly instinct, right? And then it was, they couldn't find the body for 3 months, it just went downstream. So it was this weird in limbo thing, but I knew she was dead. Her mom knew she was dead, just like instinctual connections. But a lot of other people had like hope for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So yeah, it was a weird in limbo thing, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. How did her death affect you and change the course of the following months and years?
Oh, it completely destroyed me as a human being. I ended up I was living in Oakland at the time. I packed up my whole studio and went up to Occidental, like right by the beach, and kind of outside of Santa Rosa, and stayed with my mentor, this guy named Adam Ramsayer, who's an amazing jeweler, and he kind of just took me under his wing for about 3 months. But I can trace my alcoholism to that first night after she died, sitting in his living room, crying my eyes out, drinking a bottle of wine. And that's when I realized that you can use alcohol to manipulate your emotions and soften sadness and tragedy.
Mm-hmm.
And
so before that, it had been kind of part of the party arsenal.
Mm-hmm. And I was just using it differently. It was like, I just like to drink. It was just fun and games, da-da-da. But that's when it all kind of shifted. around age 25, I ended a 4-year relationship because I was with a partner that would kind of keep me in check. And then once we broke up, because she was kind of emotionally abusive and just kind of a broken woman. And once we broke up, then I really just started diving into everything and just kind of going crazy and risky sexual behavior and just drinking and just like, just letting loose after being in a almost 4-year relationship. And so then it just kept sliding. It just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And more like started taking Xanax all the time and tons of just cocaine and just really going for it. And dating really toxic women, strippers, and I think I've dated 7 people with 1 dead parent. So there's a trend there for sure. So yeah, I just kept progressing and that's when the severe anxiety and panic attacks and depression that's when it really set in. And there was a day that it got so bad, panic attacks, just complete dissociation. Went to a psych ward in Oakland, and they kind of just did a quick little 5-minute conversation with some old guy in a lab's coat. Prescribed me, I think it was 250 milligrams of sertraline and some sort of benzo downer, just to kind of a 10-day script, just to stop the progression of it getting worse. But it was just a Band-Aid, so it didn't really fix anything.
When did was there kind of one bottoming out or darkest time, or was it a series of really deep lows, or when did things get to their worst for you?
I would say winter of 2017 in Oakland. I would say that was a figurative rock bottom, one of many, but and that's when I really started abusing drugs and getting where it's super unhealthy. But in the workshop, there's this warehouse in Oakland, which I still own part of, but it was, there's 10 studios there, and it was also just like a drug vending machine. Like the guy downstairs sold ketamine, the other one sold pills, oxys, weed. Like it was just all around at all times. And so, that much accessibility definitely fuels the fire.
Yeah. How did you survive that? I could see that was just like a perfectly awful place for you to be.
Yeah, honestly, the only way I physically survived it was I drew the line at opiates, because if I picked that taste up, I'd be dead in a week. So physically, that's probably how I survived it. I'm also extremely resilient to substances. I feel like I'm kind of a cockroach, it's hard to kill.
Yeah.
I started talking about, I needed help bad. So the year after that, I moved back to Colorado for about a 3-month period to quote unquote get sober, get my stuff together. And I had this new psychiatrist in Cherry Creek that was kind of like I would say like a rich person's psychiatrist that you kind of go in there and whatever you want, they'll give you, And I
kind of a white coat drug dealer.
Exactly. And he was very well respected, but he was in his last year before retirement. So I could tell he just didn't really care that much. And I kind of manipulated, I know what to say to get drugs, and I know all the words to say. So basically he prescribed me Klonopin and Xanax, a lot, 32 milligram bars a month and probably 61 milligram Klonopin.
Oh my gosh.
And then he wrote me a double script. And of course I didn't say anything. I was like, ooh. And insurance, covered that. So it was $15 for, 60 Xanax and like 60 Klonopin a month, which is, no one should have that.
No.
Ever. So there was about...
That's just frightening. That is,
yeah, it was complete.
I hear stories like that a lot, but they literally, like, that's drug dealer behavior. Just, what do you want?
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Let's give you enough to make sure you are completely physiologically and psychologically dependent.
Yeah, for sure. I didn't really know how addicting and physically dependent you can get on benzodiazepines. Yeah, so having that amount, it just took over my entire life. And, they say it's kind of alcohol in a pill. And I probably drank and was on benzos for a year and a half, or almost 2 years every single day. A lot of people that would kill within the first week. Yeah, that's when life got really messy. It's like I can handle alcoholism on its own, but as soon as you introduce the benzos into it, then it's just a blackout spiral.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, benzos plus alcohol to me is just blackout. Like, just like cut out, excise big parts of your life that you will not remember.
Yeah. But at the same time, I was still, I was crushing my jewelry business and producing like great work. And, I'll never forget like setting a $25,000 tourmaline in a complete blackout. And like, I'd wake up to just like finished pieces and like great stone settings. So that's kind of how I...
Did you rationalize your substance use? Because, a lot of people I work with will come and say to me, I can't be that bad of an addict if, I can operate, 100%. If I can do anesthesia, if I can ride a bike or, run my business and I made more money last year than ever. Like, like the ability to be really good at what you do actually can be this rationalization. Like, how bad could it be?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what kind of made me turn a blind eye to it for years, as it got progressively worse. Yeah, because I was still I just felt like this kind of Hunter S. Thompson type, just like, just the creative, doing all these drugs and still making really good art. But yeah, if I wasn't able to perform, it all would have ended,
right.
Years before that.
Plus your drug use is endorsed by, as you said, a kind of fancy rich person psychiatrist in Cherry Creek. I mean, how bad could it be? Those are prescribed to you by a highly educated, well-respected person. So.
Exactly.
Perfect.
And, and I didn't think about that much. Like, I know what benzos are. Like, it doesn't matter where they come from. But because I was eating prescription benzos and not street benzos with fentanyl and all the gross stuff, like, I would have died for sure if I was eating those types of street benzos just pressed in someone's basement with dark web alprazolam and fentanyl, So in this situation, that's why I didn't really die too, because it's just pure alprazolam.
Yeah. How does that resolve? I mean, you're on enough benzos that if you were to stop, you'd have a grand mal seizure and die. You've got a steady source of them. You're more or less functioning at work and actually doing some amazing pieces. And what's the end result of this course?
Well, it ended in a bit of a firestorm. So I lived with my best friend from, 6th grade on pretty much, and shared a workshop with him, a great painter. And there was about 3 days in a row where I was eating probably over 10 2-milligram bars a day. And there's one night I ate probably a whole month's prescription of Klonopin in one night and just complete blackout, just kind of thrashed the house. And I was just looping. I was telling him the same things every day for 3 days in a row. And it got to a point where it was like, all right, this he's going to die. So he called my family. They pretty much threatened to not talk to me or support me or anything anymore unless I came back right now. And of course, I missed my first flight back, But I was tired. It was the end of the road, and I knew it was just time. So I moved back to Colorado, and also I cut everything cold turkey. Benzo and alcohol withdrawals is one of the only things that can, kill you right off the bat, especially those amounts. It's a, again, cockroach,
Yeah.
So I didn't have any seizures, but yeah, it was just cold turkey. Just, the next 3 days, my parents' room above their garage, just dying, not actually dying, but feeling like it. But looking back, you do medical supervision, you take trazodone, right, and taper off and all that. So yeah, lucky nothing extremely bad happened there.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen people have grand mal seizures coming off, 1/15th, 1/20th, what you stopped cold turkey.
Yeah, so that could have been really bad.
Yeah.
I thought I was going to go back to Oakland after that, just quick little IOP, back. And people around me were like, no way, just don't go back to. And I lived in a really rough neighborhood in West Oakland. It was just the worst poverty, probably 300 people in tents, living right around me, just heroin needles, human feces everywhere. It was gnarly for sure. Mm-hmm. So it was not this vibrant, I love being in the Bay Area, but it was pretty gutter. Went back, grabbed all my stuff, drove back, got my whole workshop, and then I ended up going to Valiant treatment in DTC in South Denver. And I kind of got tricked into it, honestly. My parents were like, oh, let's sign up for this little thing. And then I had no idea. It was all day, every day for about, it tapered off, but it was about 5 months of sitting in groups, talking. And it was pretty intense. And I always had the craziest stories out of everyone there. It's a weird feeling when you tell your kind of war stories and the rest of the room of addicts is like, what? It's not fun hanging out with a bunch of broken men all day, every day. So it was pretty intense, but it did work. I was sober for completely sober for 1 year and 9 months about. So Sean, and I still to this day, he's my weekly therapist. You're a practitioner, but as far as substance abuse counselors, I only trust people that were complete piece of shit drug addicts themselves. Only people that have been through the ringer, conquered drug addiction, and out of jail. They get it. So I really respect him, and he's also how I found out about you. He's very tapped into he teaches, but just Denver therapeutic educational fields. And so that's how I found you. And he's been extremely helpful. And honestly, he knows more about me than anyone else pretty much in this world. You don't get better unless you're 100% honest with your practitioners.
Yeah.
Whether it be psychiatrists, ketamine therapy, therapists, talk therapy, you only get better if you're telling the complete truth.
You've had a long and complicated relationship with ketamine. So there were kind of the early years where ketamine was largely recreational, possibly self-medicating. I want to hear more about that. And then the more recent journey with ketamine with me, doing intravenous treatments for bipolar depression.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it started about when I was probably about 19 years old. I lived actually a couple blocks away from here. It was more focused on, I was very music centric at that point, and seeing jam bands and electronic music and just party. And so, yeah, it started as in the crowd, do a little powder ketamine and more the musical experience and all that. And over the years, I kind of just kept doing more and more and more in these situations. And I remember at Rothbury, 2000, or when I was turning, I think 20 years old, Oh no, 18 years old. Somewhere, nah, sorry, I take that back. 20 years old. I was doing ketamine to the amount where I would kind of completely get stuck in a K-hole and literally like times waking, like coming back out of it, like in a ditch on the ground, at a music festival. So just really pushing the limits of it. And I remember one time in front of the Boulder Theater, I did way too much and was just like on the concrete in front of the venue, puking, just so it hit a point where it was like that's how really bad things happen for sure. And so I hit this point where it was, and also communicating with people, you're in this awkward, just like sedated state. And it's not a good look as a human being. So, and especially as an artist, you don't want to really portray that, as a jeweler, you kind of got to be on point. So as time went on, I made a rule, no more ketamine in public, and especially mixed with alcohol and all that stuff. But then as I had some very, I would say, transcendental experiences that were extremely intense in a good way, crazy visions of like, I remember this, one of the most intense ones, it was like me and this girl snorting like a whole gram just to the face, last day of a festival, and had this whole vision of like boarding this alien spaceship and these crazy lights. It's hard to describe. Then there's a lot of female entities in my ketamine visions. And I remember this like kind of almost like lizard serpentine, like alien queen, like handed me this skeleton key that could like unlock any lock. And, so a couple experiences like that where it was like, wow, there's a lot of potential in this realm. It's one of the most interesting substances on this planet, I think, as far as I've done most psychedelics that exist, and I've experienced a lot of different altered states of mind. Ketamine is one of the most interesting, but over time it turned to a more self-medicating state and experience where it'd be, me in a dark room with a candle, no auditory stimulation, and it was more of an introspective experience. And I definitely noticed benefits from that, where it was kind of this reset. But as with street ketamine and my addictive personality, it's definitely a gray area of addiction, danger, bad stuff. And definitely the night before my friend had the kind of intervention, I got moved back home and whatnot. Ketamine was involved that night before, the couple nights before. And, it was to the point where I was just like on the floor, sedated, and people were just like, what's going on? Like, is he okay? So some red zone experiences, and then I just completely took a break from it for over 2 years. And I think I did it only once before coming to your practice and doing it the right way.
Yeah.
And
did you seek it out, or did someone recommend to you that you should do ketamine for depression?
So it was Sean, my substance abuse therapist that I'm still seeing. So he made the referral to you, and
he knew your long history with ketamine.
He knows everything about me, and he's still, he's a big proponent for psilocybin, MDMA, and ketamine therapy because it's what healed his trauma for him. He got shot in the stomach by the Denver police and has had just a bunch of trauma, and MDMA therapy is what made him get over everything and truly heal. So, when your substance abuse therapist is recommending these types of treatments, it's like, all right.
And it's pretty enlightened of him because, this is a big issue in the ketamine treatment world is people who are actively in addiction, or B, or in recovery, or C, definitely for people who have abused ketamine or even been addicted to it in the past. Like, are they safe people for ketamine treatment? And my sense is, and I explored this in the Adderall episode in season 1, is that many people with an addiction history or in addiction currently and or who've had problems with ketamine in the past can in fact use ketamine safely in a therapeutic context if it's monitored carefully and used thoughtfully. So I'm curious what your experience is. All those years of probably hundreds of ketamine experiences, some of them going very badly and ending up in ditches and and then
Yeah.
coming to see me where you're in a recliner with headphones and eye shades in a very controlled manner getting intravenous ketamine.
Yeah, it's completely opposite sides of the coin, honestly. If I'm in control and there's an ounce of ketamine around me, I will do it until it's gone. But in this situation, the pre-therapy, the highly controlled aspect, as you speak of, going through I remember after my first session with you, it's such a intense experience, and it's completely different as well with the time frame and a slow IV drip compared to like a nasal overload where you're in, you're out. I'll never forget the first time I had no desire in my brain to do any more ketamine. It's like, wow, I'm tired. That was such a profound experience that I'm okay on that realm for the foreseeable future. And
that's so interesting. And I've heard that from other people too, that it's almost like Thanksgiving dinner. It's such a big experience that, I think it's a rare person who says, I want to have Thanksgiving dinner again.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
next night. And
Exactly.
again, mostly that's what I hear from people after, these fully dissociative IV ketamine experiences, that it's very deep and intense. And I don't hear people, and in fact, I ask people like, are you going on the dark web? Are you looking for ketamine? Are you craving it? And almost invariably, I hear no.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me, and that's why it caught me so off guard, honestly, because I'm just very at terms with my addictions and who I am as a person and my patterns over the past. And yeah, it was very fascinating to me that I had no desire, no craving. I can get ketamine, like no desire to do that. And yeah, it was almost confusing to me just knowing my history. And yeah, and it's been consistently that way since I've started doing these procedures with you.
Yeah.
And I haven't done ketamine outside of, I guess I did maybe one bump at a show at Red Rocks, but outside of, I never seek it out. It's usually, someone just had a little bit, but I haven't seeked it out or had any drive to do that over the past, how many months have I been coming here? It seems like
since spring, maybe.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
a good
8
period
months.
of time,
Yeah.
So that's, I would say, a pretty solid testament to the non-addictive nature of it when done through the proper routes.
Yeah.
And the benefits of it massively outweigh the risk. I would say like 100 to 1, because I'm a functional human being. I'm more stable, I would say, than I've ever been.
Yeah, what specifically, when you think of how you are mentally, emotionally, functionally, when it's time to do a ketamine treatment versus the days and weeks after?
So usually as we space it out, obviously it's a maintenance treatment. As we approach 3-4 weeks out, I would say about more 4 weeks out, I definitely notice a little dip in sliding back to the old versions of my brain. So it's always kind of right on time for me, if that makes sense. Our scheduling cycle is just exactly what it takes for my brain to be okay. And on top of other medication, constant talk therapy, and work I do on my own, it's the one stabilizer though, so on a scale of 1 to 10 mental state, I'm able to stay within like 4, 5, 6 and about like a sine wave instead of this 9 huge crazy manic upswing to like down to 2 suicidal craziness, so it's taken the amplitude of that and it's brought it into a way more manageable zone.
Can you describe what it feels like in those days after an IV treatment? How are your thoughts different? How Are your emotions different? How is your resilience different?
Absolutely. After, right at the days after an infusion, it turns off the alcoholic part of my brain. It's hard to describe, but alcohol just sounds terrible to me, which is wild as a chronic alcoholic. So that's that's the first thing. It's super impactful. It's so like black and white and obviously it kind of wears off over time, and in addition to that, it's the first time I find like peace in, weeks, and I feel okay with things, and suicidal ideations get turned off like a light switch, just done. And I have faith in the future. I have faith in myself. I get a little sliver of self-love for the first time in a while. And in layman's terms, the analogy I use is, when your internet starts acting up and not working, when you unplug the router, plug it back in, and all of a sudden, everything just works. So I would say those are the main benefits, after. And then that continues on and kind of varies the next couple of weeks depending on the decisions I'm making in my life and how healthy I am and managing addiction or relapse. And, so there's a lot of variables. And, sometimes it is hard to isolate said variables because of being on 3 other medications in varying amounts. Now everything's consistent, but as we first started doing this, it was like, oh, we switched the medication here. I'm on a different SSRI or different amounts of bipolar medication. And so it was hard to tell what was doing what. But now that I've been on the same doses of those for a while, it's much more consistent, each treatment.
And how is the IV experience different for you, the sort of in the therapeutic context versus the, intranasal, high dose, abusing recreational context?
Absolutely. Well, doing FDA-approved human-grade ketamine is completely different than just on a molecular level than most of what you find on the street. There's a lot of crazy analogs, made in sketchy labs in China, sold over the dark web, and that's what most of street ketamine is. So it's more of a sedative than a psychedelic kind of activator. And using it intranasally, it's a bunch hitting your system all at once and you going to this really intense state, and then you're kind of out of it. And I think it's too fast for the brain to actually get the benefits of it. Getting a IV treatment of human grade, how long are the sessions usually?
Yeah, usually we drip it in over maybe 35, 40 minutes. So probably fairly deeply in it for 50 minutes-ish.
Yeah, and so that, I would describe it as a slow parabolic curve, the intensity. It goes up, 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 and then down, but it's the slow, smooth process. And I think, I'm no neuroscientist, but I think that's where the true benefits come in the kind of the mental reset, to say it simply. Having music is so crucial. It kind of serves as the container to guide the experience. I did one without music and just experiment, and it got a little messy. It was kind of weird.
There's nothing to contain the experience.
Exactly.
I think it's like, ego, somatic dissolution dissolving with no container, with no music to hold it. It can be very unsettling and unnerving.
Yeah, it felt very muddy, just like kind of dragging through the mud. And yeah, it's more confusion, honestly, than anything. So music is extremely crucial, and curating your music and picking the perfect type before you go into it with intention. So that's extremely important in my experience. And recreational stuff a long time ago, I was never thinking about all of that. So yeah, it's just a completely different experience. I mean, it's in the same genre, but I've never, doing recreational ketamine, I've never once ever got close to the amount of benefits or long-lasting positive impact it's not even comparable, which is so wild because it's similar substances, but until coming to your clinic and doing this on a regimented, everything's extremely calculated and recorded, and the therapy before and after, it's just completely different in the most beneficial way possible.
Yeah, well, I think context and intention matters so much with these substances. You think of, how many people every weekend in the world are taking MDMA, and how many of them are being cured of their PTSD? Like, not many.
Not many.
0.0001%. Yeah. But there are, but that said, there are people in the MAP study and other people doing underground work who are healing their PTSD with MDMA because they're using it specifically for that purpose in that context. And I think ketamine is a similar thing, that ketamine has been used and abused for decades. And I guess it's the number one drug of abuse in China, which is kind of mind-blowing to me.
Well, most of it gets made there in unregulated, crazy labs. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was so close to the supply.
Mm-hmm. So I wonder if we might shift to first just talking about how far you've come and why. Because, you and I met last spring, and I was just so impressed with you from the beginning, just how insightful and motivated and committed and just smart and awesome you were, and how close you've been to death. And, as before we were recording, as I was coming here today, I was thinking, what were the things for Graham that really have changed things? And again, sitting here listening to your story again, my sense is, and I'd like you to weigh in on this, my sense is what's really shifted is, one, you've given up benzos. Mm-hmm. Two, huge. Your therapist, you, as you talked about, you've been just brutally, openly honest with him. And, in my therapy work with my patients, I just think it's just, that is job one. Like, if you can't have trust and honesty, and, ain't nothing good going to happen. I think getting an accurate bipolar diagnosis was crucial, and then getting on lamotrigine, Lamictal was a total game changer. And I think the ketamine treatments have been crucial. And, and I'm glad you talked about this today, that leaving your old playground of Oakland, in AA, they kind of disregard the geographic here, but sometimes you need a different playground. Sometimes you actually need to move to a different state, or for you it was coming back home. But my sense is coming back to Colorado has actually been a key part of the healing experience.
Absolutely. And like you were saying, it's so much of addiction is tied to people, places, and things. And it's kind of step one is change your environment, change the people you're around. Maybe don't hang out with a bunch of drug dealers and, drug abusers. And so those two things are crucial. And even just little mental connections. Like, I associate the sound of my heater in my old studio with severe alcoholism and ketamine abuse. And I got rid of all my clothes when I moved back, and just all my blankets, everything, my brain associated with those states. And you get to a point where you're sick and tired. And honestly, one of the biggest things for me was feeling my best friends move away from, distance themselves from me. And as soon as I felt that happening, then that was one of the most impactful things, where it was like, oh my gosh, am I really going to let my addictions ruin my relationships with the people I love most? And my family too. I was kind of just off on my own, doing my own thing for about 8 years, and everything was my fault. Everything with the family unit was my fault. And coming home, and I was just this black sheep that was kind of a punching bag for my family unit. And then once I got back, got sober for that first year and 9 months, and kind of re-tapped in with them, all their same dysfunction and issues were all still there. And it was like, haha, ta-da, this is clearly there's way different issues and I'm not just the problem, you know?
So that's a really important additional one that sounds like you've also made such progress because you have not just sort of reconnected with your family, but your position in the family, the story about you and the family has changed.
Absolutely. I'm the kind of the safe space now. And now me and my mom and me and my dad, we're buddy. And it's wild going from the black sheep to the, oh, you're the reliable one. You're the emotional safe space. Oh, you're going to handle the trust, you know, once we die, and kind of the point man moving forward. So that's a crazy transition, I will say. And that's
got to feel good. I mean,
it feels
about
so good.
There's just so much guilt and shame and addiction. And, yours goes way back to even as a little kid feeling like, why am I not achieving like my parents want me to? And like the tests say I should. And now in 2021 to realize that your parents actually respect you. They see you. They're proud of you. You're not the black sheep or the dark secret of the family, but you're the go-to.
Yeah. And it's wild. And, dropping out of CSU at 19 years old for a year, and I think I got like a 1.1 GPA that first year, but I was ditching class to make jewelry and I was partying and all this. But when I dropped out and moved to San Francisco to go to jewelry school, that was my parents were definitely like, oh God, like I hope this works, But for the first time I was pursuing what I wanted instead of what status quo, social norms, whatever wanted me to do. And my parents wanted me this engineer and this like MIT genius, and it was like, I'm so not that. I'm this metal worker, creative artist.
Thank goodness you found art. I mean, just because even back in the dark Oakland days when you were slowly dying, like you were making art, you're making art here. Like that seems like that's been this island of confidence and competence and excellence that has always carried through.
Well, it's also just out of necessity because never really had a real job. It's like I put all my eggs in this basket, and it's also what I've derived all my self-worth out of over the years. And it all started out of severe insecurity too, because I was terrible at school, terrible at sports, just nothing. I had no identity or anything I was good at really. So as soon as I got a taste of it, I just went full speed. But the driving force was honestly to just like be something and have value and have people respect me or get compliments or, so it all came from a very insecure place. But people, 11 years later, everyone that's observed that I have not given up and I still do it every single day. And surviving through art it's very difficult. There's lots of fluctuations and it's hard. The boss runs a real loose ship, I'm in control. And that's another reason too, all my addictions were able to sustain for so long because it's like, all right, I'm the boss. Like I had no accountability structure besides like getting projects done.
So where do you get accountability now? Because I think of that as such a crucial part of, the behavior change out of, the addictive, isolative, deceitful life to an open, healthy, connected life.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm still very much working on it. This week definitely slipped into some alcoholic cycles, and I don't have a ton of accountability besides still the same, like projects, deadlines, talking to clients. Being around my family definitely helps in seeing them, every once in a while. Not often, but having my sweet little Frenchie, Lola, having a creature that 100% relies on me for everything, that'll stop a bender. It's like I can mess around for a day, but at the end of it, I had to take care of my little doggy child.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a big part of accountability currently. Friend groups, and just more than anything, it's just me. It's no one else can heal an addict but themselves.
That's maybe your greatest challenge going forward.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's wild what your brain can trick you into doing. It's, sometimes I think there's just like these little gremlins that live in my brain, and they trick me that, that feeling you get of needing to drink water, eating food, all these biological incentives. It's like as powerful as that with alcohol. And it's wild. It's like sometimes my brain just checks out, and then I go to the liquor store and all of a sudden I'm drinking, and it's almost this like unconscious thing.
It's like in a dissociation.
Yeah, exactly. I would that's the perfect word for it. Almost a dissociation where you just kind of check out, and it's almost like the lizard brain takes over, and it just it's pretty wild. It's hard to describe to someone who's not a severe addict, And that's why with talk therapists, I only trust people that have been through that cycle. And clinical practitioners, that's completely different. I would rather them be they got good grades in college and finished everything and have a,
in my mind, I think what's happening with that sort of dissociated, numb, sort of automatic, robotic, drive to the heroin dealer or walk through the aisles of the liquor store, I think it's as soon as you consciously or even unconsciously make the decision, let's say to drink, your body's getting ready, your body and your mind, and you're starting to flood with the endorphins that are going to come from that first slug of alcohol. And so you are in this sort of high, numbed, dissociated state, I think, before you're even using. And
I would agree.
Yeah, it's like your body's like, oh yeah, here it comes.
Yep, and especially, obviously, there's all these statistics about the earlier you start drinking, the more severe alcoholism will be over the course of your life. And I think it's just that early hardwiring of just those dopamine just circuits, and it just gets more ingrained. It's almost like a path walking through the forest. If one person walks through it, there won't be a path. But if 1,000 people walk, say 1,000 times drinking, then there's no vegetation there. It's a hard path that you can see. And so I think it just gets hammered into your brain and reinforced. And that's why I'm so glad I'm trying to do work now instead of, I have a lot of people in my family that are trying to deal with this when they're like 62 years old, and they're on their third divorce and they've lost their kids and countless DUIs and almost jail time. And I can't even imagine reprogramming at that pace, that point in life. If I had another 30 years of severe alcoholism onto my life or my current age, I don't know how you reprogram, but my uncle's doing it. He's been sober since last November, so it is possible. It just takes, I think, a lot more tragedy to really make you change your path. So
I wonder if, I hadn't thought of it this way, but I wonder if us sitting here today and you telling your story, if this is actually a kind of accountability. I asked you before, do you want to use your real name? You said yes. Mm-hmm. And you said, look, I want to be honest. I want to put my story out there, and I want people to know. And I just want to be real. And I just, as I'm listening to you, I think there's something really deeply accountable and honest and brave to just sit here and let this all spill out.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And back to accountability and transitions that have happened over the last, say, 4 years. And I stopped lying. I realized, one, that my memory isn't good enough to maintain a web of lies, but it got me nowhere. It just, pure honesty, even if it's some terrible stuff happens and relapses and everything, it's just so much easier to just be completely honest about everything. People respect it so much. And, if you're being a sneaky addict and lying and hiding, like, that's when you know you have a severe, severe problem. And you're not going to get better unless you're 100% honest to yourself as best you can be. And there's mental distortions, and addict brain does weird stuff, but your peers, you have to be completely honest. Your therapists, and especially your medical practitioners, if you're getting depression, bipolar medication, or ketamine treatment, like you have to be a complete open book. And I was from day one, because if you're putting bad data into the equation, your results are not going to be as good, I don't think.
Yeah, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So, I've gotten rid of all the guilt. It's all been, the ego, the guilt, the shame, like it's been beaten out of me by life. So I come as I am, it's an open book, but I think it is just accountability too. Self-accountability.
Yeah. Speaking of the double-edged nature of psychoactive drugs, I think it's not an accident that the drug that Graham still struggles with is alcohol. Surely the most destructive drug in human history. On Thanksgiving Day this year, I lost yet another patient to alcoholism, and he was just 35 years old. A dear and sweet and kind man. I would estimate that at least half of all the chaos and morbidity and suffering in my 20 years of psychiatric practice has been a direct result of alcohol. Surely, if we can live with legalized alcohol, which destroys millions upon millions of lives a year, surely we can find a way to live with medicalized and legalized psychedelics.